Welcome. Today we're going to look at creating a collection using a number of different file types. We're going to use MP3 audio files, some PDF files, Word files, and a couple other file types. And we're going to use a few macros specific to our collection to do a number of things with it. So first, you want to create a new collection using File New. We're going to call this collection Week 8. Once the collection is created, go off to the Gather tab, browse to your home folder, scroll on down to the Dropbox, go into LIS 9720 and the Week 8 folder. Inside are the content files we're going to use, so drag the Add Beat Small folder into your collection window. By default, Greenstone has a MP3 plugin loaded, but when you drag in that folder, there are some MP3 files in it, so it's going to ask you if you want that plugin. Click Add Plugin. The other thing you want to do once the collection is created is in the Dropbox, the Week 08 folder, there are an Images folder, which is going to go to your Images collection. So copy the files, the contents from that Images folder, and put them in the Images folder of your collection, which is under Greenstone, Collect, Week 8, and then Images. What you'll have is a number of icons that came with these content files, some replacement icons in the new folder, and some CSS style sheets. As usual, our first task is to remove the useless indexes, those that don't have any value. So we're going to get rid of the two search ones and the browsing index for the file names, the xsource one. Now we're going to add some metadata. You'll notice something interesting about the folder we dragged into the collection. If you expand it, you see there's 7 subfolders. So we've organized all our content into folders. Now this is actually a good idea because you can assign metadata to a folder. All the files within that folder then inherit that metadata, so it makes it a lot faster to add your metadata. So in this case, we're going to take the first folder and add the metadata value to DC format. Now this technique of organizing content into folders can be used in a number of ways. Let's say you had a collection of MP3 files. You could organize your source or content files by artist first. So we've got 3 artists: Dr. Seuss, Garbage, The Donnas, Violent Femmes, 4 artists. And within that we have albums for each of those artists. So we've got Dr. Seuss with 2 albums, Charles Garden of Bleach, and I Heard a Word. And within that album we have the actual songs that make up the album. So this is going to make cataloging a lot faster because we just have to assign the DC creator or artist to the top level folder for that artist, and then we assign the album name to the album folder. So all these songs within each folder are going to inherit those 2 bits of metadata, saving us a fair amount of time. Okay, back to the Enrich tab to finish our metadata. So we're going to select the second folder, which is HTML lyrics, and we're going to assign a DC format value of lyrics for that. We're going to then choose the Images folder, and we'll assign a DC format value of images, and then select the Mark Record folder and assign a DC format value of Mark. The last 3 folders, we have an MP3 folder. We're going to select and add audio to DC format. We then take the tablature folder and add that value to DC format. And finally, we have a bunch of Word and PDF documents about the collection. There's reviews, academic papers, whatever. We're going to assign the value of supplementary to that DC format. Okay, now one of the advantages as well of setting your folders, organizing your content into folders, is now we can create an index based on these folder types. So we're going to go to the design and select browsing classifiers and choose AZ compact list from the pull down. Then we can set the metadata value to this index to DC format. We're also going to change the label by setting the button name to Browse by Format. Now go off to the Create tab and click Build Collection. You'll notice that this is going to take much longer to build than what you've been doing so far. Why? There's 141 documents in it. So creating indexes from those takes a lot more time. If you take a look at the log as it goes through, you can see there's all kinds of different files being processed. Once it's done, click on Preview and let's see what we have. Now, if we go onto the Browse by Format index and click on each index node, we see how it was created. So based on what was in DC format, we now have an audio index node. We have images, lyrics, supplementary, and all this sort of stuff. If you click on one of those, you'll see different formats. So each index has a little bit of a different format based on the content type. And there's either 3 columns or 4 columns. Those that have source files or images get 4 columns. Those that are just plain text files or HTML files get 2 columns. Now if you click on the audio one, you'll see there's a 4-column display. The top one is the index node entry with the default bookshelf and then the text for that index entry. We looked at the records underneath. We see there's a number of MP3 files of 3 columns. The first column has the link to the documentText or Greenstone converted document. And that icon will end up basically showing the document has no text because there is no text in an MP3. There's nothing to convert to text, nothing there. The second column has the source file icon, and that matches the type of source file. In this case it's an MP3, so the MP3 default icon is being displayed. If you click that, it goes to the original source file. In this case it'll play the MP3. Now what happens at that point depends on the user's computer. Whatever program on their machine, not yours, on their machine is associated with the MP3 file extension will be loaded. It could be Windows Media Player, it could be QuickTime on a Mac. In this case I loads VLC Player on my computer. And the last column of course is the metadata. Now what we're going to do is change the default display. We're going to go up to the Format tab, select Format Features, and then select our index. It's a classifier 2 based on DC format. We're going to click the Add Format and delete the existing HTML format string and replace it with our custom code. Now, because we have multiple types of documents, our code is a little more complicated. What we're going to do is use the macro, the if one we've done before at the top, to determine if we're at the index node level. So we're going to test for the existence of numleaf docs, which is only true at index nodes. If it's true, what comes after the first column is going to display the node, which is the bookshelf icon. And it's going to be hyperlinked to the matching either records for that index node or subnodes using link, icon, and link. Now the second part, we're going to put another if inside our first if. So this is called a nested if, where we're going to check for each value in DC format, because we're going to have different formats for different types of files. So if it's equal to audio, what are we going to do? We're going to hyperlink to the MP3 icon. So we'll play that. If it's supplementary, we're going to hyperlink to, in this case it would be a Word or PDF icon. If it's images, we're going to display the thumbnail, link to that. And you notice the link one goes to the document text level. So we're linking everything to the document text except for MP3s, PDFs, or Word documents. And the second column is just going to display some metadata. The only metadata we have there is going to display EX title. Now remember, EX title also contains the index entry text, so we're using numleaf docs to test for that. So for the second column, if we're at the index node entry, we're going to highlight the index node text, and display in brackets and italics the number of documents each node contains. If we're not there, after the second column is the false, then we're going to display the records. In this case, just going to make it purple and display the title. Okay, select File Save and go off to your web browser and click the Audio tab, and we'll see what's happened. We see now at the top part is the bookshelf icon for the index node. There's EXText, displaying the index node text, the entry for that, and the numleaf docs is displayed. There are 4 matching records for this index entry, and we see them. First column has the MP3 that if you click on it will load the song into your default media player, and the second column has EXTitle in purple. So here is an explanation of the code that does these 2 things. Now this is a fairly simple format statement. We've just got an icon and a very little bit of multi-data. This is probably not all that good for a user. A user would probably want to know more. How long is the song? Who wrote it? When did it come out? What album is it from? So we would have to display additional metadata that we have to add ourselves. And again, the only notable part about this format statement is the use of if. In fact, use of multiple ifs nested within. So one if is inside of another if. So the most commonly used macro in a Greenstone collection is if. You'll be using it for pretty well all of your indexes except for the list type of index, and you may even end up using it in other locations as well. Now if can be used with metadata such as DC this or EX that, or it can be used with variables, so the test condition could be one or the other. Typically, as we've seen in indexes, we're using it to determine 2 sets of formatting instructions, one for the index node and one for the index records. Now most of the time we've been using equals, which can be put as equals. You could also use not equals, which is a double equals, or can be used as NE. They can be greater than or less than, starts with N. So there's a number of comparison operators you can use with your if macro. And the most common variable we're using with our if macro is the numleaf docs variable, though it can be used with others. You can use it to test for values in DC format or any other metadata element. You can check for EX source, which is the file name. You can use it for anything like that. Another variable we used today was the highlight one, which really used for index nodes. It has nothing to do with the records. It doesn't control search term highlighting. It's really slightly misnamed, but it only works with the index nodes or table of contents. Now other variables we use so far today are these ones here, used all the time. The link can link to the document text if you're at the record level. At the index node level, it links to subnodes or associated records. Source link always links to the original document, if there was an original document. Icon is either the bookshelf index node icon at the index level, or the Greenstone converted document at the document record index level. Source icon is the icon for the original source file. Typically, by default, that's used with source link to the original file, but you don't have to. The thumbnail icon, of course, is the thumbnail of any image file, the source file. And here's a summary of some of the most commonly used variables. Most of these have used, some we haven't. For example, num, doc rank, and things like that are used only in search results, so we haven't used those yet. For a document collection, a collection that's based really around documents, search would probably be useful using those 2 variables of num and doc rank. For example, here I've created a display that shows the ranking score. Now why would this be useful? The user could see how quickly the score falls off, and perhaps only the first 5 documents are relevant, and after that the next 5 are not very relevant. So it gives the user a way of gauging the relevance of the documents. This would not be useful in a lot of collections, but in ones where search isn't a very important part, it could be a handy function for your users. Typically we've been using if macros with DC metadata elements, but only displaying the first value. But it's possible for many records to have multiple metadata values, such as multiple DC subjects, multiple DC creators, even several titles, alternative title and things. The way to display those is to use the sibling attribute for your DC element. Here's a table summarizing all the attributes you can use with DC elements. Typically you probably want to add some formatting in there. either a BR or a semicolon or something to separate the multiple elements. You also notice there's a CGI safe. Again, what this does is to make sure that the code is URL friendly in case you're using it as part of a reference. Now let's go back to working on our index. One of the things is that MP3 icon by default that comes with Greenstone is not that attractive. It's not really 3D, doesn't look like it could be clicked. The user may not think about it. So what we're going to do first is replace that icon with a nicer one. We had copied over with all the files in our images folder, and one of them was an MP3 icon. So we're going to go back to Format, Format Features, CL2, and change the third line. We're going to replace delete the icon variable, bracket icon bracket, with an image source tag that's going to refer to that MP3 icon. We're going to use a macro for that. We can't use image source equals C:/ program file / Greenstone / collect / week 8. So what we're going to do is the macro HTTPCI images, which contains the location of your Greenstone install. And in fact, not only just the install, but your collection and the images folder. So all we need to add to that macro is the folder, because we stuck a whole bunch of new images in a new folder, and /mp3.gif. We're also going to size it. About 50 pixels is about the right size for replacement images. And what it's going to be linked to is the MP3. So again, right now, the user will click on it, and it will play the MP3 in their web browser. Now, the trouble with using just an icon as the hyperlink is, how does the user know it's an icon? They may think it just indicates what type of record it is and not know it's clickable. So we may want to add a text hyperlink to our code, because users, from experience, know what text hyperlinks are. So what we're going to here is modify the column with the metadata in it, and we're going to add something here that's going to say click to listen to the song, and we're going to put source link tags around it, so that's going to link it to the MP3. So we're going to have a text hyperlink that when clicked plays the MP3. So we put the code in and do file save, and then refresh your web page, and we can see in the audio section we have the 4 MP3s with a somewhat nicer icon, not great, and we also have the hyperlink underneath that's clickable. So this is much better, and we also put in a little label. It's called song title, so they know it's the title of the song. Again, we should display additional metadata to help the user decide which of these records they want. Here's a index example from previous term using MP3s. Now they have stuck with the default MP3 icon. We probably want to replace that, but you also notice they have metadata display. You can see what kind of recording it is, the date, who publishes it, and a little bit of a summary, and also the length of time. They're using a more of a mark record approach here to this, but this is fine. I mean, this will help the user decide which one of these documents they want. Now that we've sorted out the audio ones, let's take a look at the images. So if we go back to our browse by format index and click on images, we see we have two columns: the thumbnail of the source file and the title of the image. If you click on the thumbnail, what does it do? By default, it will display the larger image. Not particularly useful. Source link is the variable that does that. If we replace source link just with link, what it's going to go to is the document text level. Unfortunately, by default, the document text level is not very useful for images. There's nothing there. But we can put things there. We can replace the default text variable with some metadata, album covers, whatever we want. We can do anything here to display a record. Okay, this is a fake record, but you'll get the idea. Maybe we display, I think this is a 45 cover. Wow. We have an icon. It should be an MP3, but it's a MIDI. And we have a link to someone can click the link to play the audio. And we have some metadata, the wrong metadata, but we'd have some metadata displayed at the document text level. So give you an idea that when the user drills down to that record, they have all the information they need to know about it. They can actually listen to it and stuff like that. So this documentText is a very flexible way, and if you think about it, there's lots of ways you can add value here for the user. Here's an example from a previous term of a documentText level for an MP3 collection. The user drills down to this record, they get lots of information, they know the producer, what it's about, they can listen to it, so there's a play button plus a hyperlink. There's also some related materials, so it's got some, if you like this podcast, maybe you like episode 5, The Heat is On. So again, this provides a lot of value to the user. Here's another silly example of a documentText level that we could actually do for this collection fairly easily, but we're not going to do that. I want to show you a couple neat techniques that we could use at the documentText level to really make your collection a lot more worthwhile. So what we have here is really a mock-up of what we could do. We would have some text explaining the thing. I just copied and pasted this from Wikipedia. Obviously, you should put a reference into it. I've got a picture of the real Penny Lane over there. I've got the MP3 icon that you could click to play. And in a little frame window, I've actually got the lyrics to the song that you could scroll up and down. So the user not only knows everything about the song, can see where it is. I could put an embedded map into Penny Lane. They could actually sing along with it if they choose. So this gives them a lot of value at the record level. So the question is, how did I do this? First, where did the picture come from? Well, the picture is one of the source files that was imported. If you go down to the images folder, scroll down, you'll see there's the Penny Lane picture. Now, when source files are imported into a collection with the gathered, remember they're converted if possible, but the originals are still there. They're put into a folder called import. So if you go down and look at the import folder, you'll see, there's the folder we dragged in, add beat small, and there's all the subfolders with the different file types. So under images, we will find the real pennylane.jpg. Now how do I refer to it? We have to use a macro. The macro HTTP prefix refers to the Greenstone installation folder. So if I use that, and then put collect for the Greenstone collect folder, and then my collection name, in this case week 8, then we have import, add beat small, then the images folder, and then the file name. So that will give me that picture. Now I can also add some width and height and some margins to style it. Now I could even, in fact, notice I'm putting in the file name as the real Penny Lane, but I could actually put in ex source as well, which is the file name for this particular record. So I could use the HTTP prefix macro along with the DC, or actually in this case an EX metadata element, EX source. So this allows me to refer to the picture. Okay, so how did I get the scrollable box with the lyrics in it? I used the HTML tag iframe here, which creates a website within a website, really a page within a page. So it creates a frame. Now how did I get the lyrics? Well, the lyrics were also imported. They're in a folder in that we gathered. So the original source file is there. So I'm using the macro HTTP prefix and collect week 8 my collection, the import folder, add beat small, and then under HTML lyrics, and then a couple other folders down, we finally get to penny.htm, which is the lyrics. So I put those in a frame that will now display for that particular record. And again, I'm using penny.htm. I should use ex source there, so I have the file name for this particular record, I would think. Then I've also referred to the song that's going to be associated with the MP3 icon. Now, unfortunately, there's no Penny MP3, so I faked this by using yesterday.mp3. Not quite the same thing, but you get the idea. So now I've got that linked to the original source file. So everything is now linked together in our record for this. There's only one problem. Different web browsers treat multimedia files differently. So if you're hyperlinking to a multimedia file, what's going to happen? Well, the web browser is going to open it in either a plugin, if one's installed, or the default media player on the computer. And how web browsers treat this varies. For example, if I click on that MP3 icon and load into Firefox, what do I get? A black bar. If I put it in Chrome, I get the play controls. A lot nicer. The user can adjust the volume, they can pause it, and all that. So we have different things here. In fact, it's not even going to play in Firefox. Again, the problem with an MP3 icon is how does the user know it's not indicating the type of record and is in fact a clickable icon? Well, maybe I replace that with a button that says play now. So here's code from a previous term in which the person has the same thing. You notice they're referring to the images folder. Actually, they used a neat trick here. Rather than using the Greenstone install source macro, they're using the usual images macro, but then going up. The .. takes them up a level and then down into the import folder where they're using ex source for the file name. So it's going to put the file name in wherever this record is. And the target is ex source to play the file. They've also got this play PNG in their images folder. There it is, the red play now. And what they're going to do, if you click that, it loads it into an iframe. The frame name is the file name, ex source, which is nice because it puts a little name on the top in bold. And then they've made it a certain size. So when the person clicks the play now, what happens? In Chrome, it loads this little iframe with the controls, as we saw earlier, the volume button and the play and pause. So the user is on the metadata. They see it on the same page. They see the same metadata. They've got the controls. They can play it all right there. Works really nice in some web browsers. Doesn't work in others. This will not work in Firefox. It doesn't play anything. Problem. Now I decided to get around the problem of the controls not showing up in Firefox by replacing them with some buttons. So I'm going to put some buttons under the icon, such as play, pause, volume up, volume down, which is going to do the same thing as those VCR type controls. So this will solve my Firefox problem. Now it solves the problem in that the buttons are there, the controls. However, if it's an MP3 file, Firefox will not play it. Now if the person has a plugin loaded to Firefox to play MP3s, they're okay. But by default, Firefox will not play MP3s. So what did I have to do? What I did is convert the MP3 to an OGG Vorbis, OGG type of file, which will play in Firefox. I use VLC to do this. So here's the code that works quite nicely in Chrome, but I have to make sure it's a OGG file to make it work in Firefox. So one of the problems with web development is typically you end up having to write a bunch of code to account for the variances in web browsers. The solution? Well, it's the same solution we used earlier in our video where we dealt with video, where we had 3 different video types. We had the MP4, we had an OGG one, I think. We had and a QuickTime one. We had 3 different video types, and the idea is that if the first one doesn't work, the second one may work, or the third one certainly will work. So we had to write code for different web browsers. In fact, if the person's using an older web browser, it may not work at all, so you have to write code to say your web browser doesn't support this. So the same thing has to be done for audio. If you want to make it work with multiple web browsers, you have to create multiple file types. So it means you have to do a bunch of conversions. So you have to have different conversions for those. So it is a bit of a pain, yes. So to summarize, here are 2 of the most useful macros that we used today. The HTTP prefix is the location of the Greenstone folder. So underneath that will be collect and then your collection folder. The HTTP CI images is the images folder for your specific collection. So both of those are used a lot. Here are some other ones that may be handy. Sometimes people write their own navigation. I've seen some projects where there's navigation buttons or some links. They may create a menu of links. Here's the home page, the help page, the search page, and they may want to put those in manually. So these macros can allow you to do that. Now the other thing that's very handy is all of the macros you create can go in a certain location. You click on the Format tab and select Collection Specific Macros. There is a place there that you can put all the macros you want. They're organized into packages. What it does is this information is written to a file called extra.dm that will be in your Collections Macros folder. So you can now define lots of stuff here that can control what is included in your collection and what it looks like. Now let's look at the first package in the macros file. Package style is where style information can be put. So far we've mainly been using inline style that's attached to a tag. This place allows you to define style that will apply to all pages. Now there is a macro called collection specific style that allows you to put stuff in, or you can put your style information in an external CSS file or style sheet and then refer to it using this macro. The link you're going to make is going to be the typical one that goes to any web page, link to a style sheet, type text CSS. The hyperlink or href, we're going to use the macro HTTP/CI images because it's going to be in our images folder. The first one we're going to use is one called rcm.css. Now, once we've put that code in, you can do file save and then refresh your page, and you'll see how style is changed by the style declarations in that CSS file. So we notice there's a little difference to some of our indexes, how they behave, and how some of our menu looks. Now if we go back and change the code to swap in the style blue CSS file and then do file save, go back to our web page and refresh, we see we now have a sort of bluish purple kind of theme going on. Here's another one. This is a very minor one, just make some changes, called Pearl. And again, the amount of change wrought by your style sheet depends on how many things you've defined. Greenstone has a bunch of style declarations in its own default style sheet, which is in the web folder, and if you use those declarations and change what they look like, it will make substantial change to the Greenstone look. We've loaded in one called Zen Style, which again has made some changes to how our menu looks and the display of text and fonts and colors in our indexes and other things. So if you're going to use an external style sheet, it really requires you to know a lot about CSS. If you don't know a lot about CSS, it's probably best to stay away from creating your own style sheet and to modify the Greenstone declarations as you need them. This is what we'll look at next week, how to start doing that. Now here is a summary of the macro packages that you can put in your collection specific area and what they control. So next week what we're going to do is we'll define some things for global, we'll define some things probably for the query interface, the home page, which is called about, and maybe start on some style stuff. So we've got a few weeks left where we're going to spend on making this look good. So by now you need to have all your indexes pretty well sorted out, your metadata designed, and we're going to start in the next few weeks really working on how to make it look good. Here's an example of some of the changes that people have done. For example, in the global package, they have used the link text home macro and changed it from about to home. They've changed the help one, so it's help, still help. They've changed the preferences menu to say settings. They've added some mouse over text for their title index to be a bit more explanatory. And they've done a bunch of other things. They define what goes on their home page. They've also given it the name of home. And they've started defining some style information for how their pages should look. So this is where we'll spend the majority of our time in the next few weeks.